CBO. U.S. debt growing dramatically worse as lawmakers quibble over borrowing cap. Not only will the $31.4 trillion debt go up dramatically, but the government will run out of money to pay its bills between July and September if lawmakers don't act soon. Feuding politicians in Washington got grim news Wednesday from Congress's nonpartisan budget analysts. The national debt is bad. It's getting worse fast, and it will cause an economic disaster if lawmakers don't act soon. Not only will the $31.4 trillion debt go up dramatically, by nearly $19 trillion over the next decade, if things continue on their current course, but if Congress doesn't increase the debt ceiling, the government will be unable to pay its bills sometime between July and September of this year. The Congressional Budget Office said in a report. The debt ceiling is the amount the U.S. government is allowed to borrow and is used to pay bills already incurred. The Treasury Department has already instituted extraordinary measures to ensure bills are being paid now. But in the next few months, those measures won't be enough anymore, CBO said. As a result, the government would have to delay making payments for some activities, default on its debt obligations, or both. The report said. The country has been living on credit for centuries, but the debt is becoming an increasing burden. Especially because of the rise in interest rates. High interest means the government has to spend more to service the national debt, exacerbating the problem. Since the government will then owe more money. The debt is different from the national deficit. The deficit is the gap between how much money the government has available to spend in a given year, and how much it obligates in spending. The debt is the accumulation of those shortfalls, combined with the interest the government must pay to borrow the money to pay its bills. The fiscal problem is matched by a political problem in Washington. While both parties have contributed to the national debt, through spending, tax cuts or both, Democrats and Republicans are eager to blame each other for it, continuing to argue even as the debt grows daily. Our fiscal house is not in order. It's past time for Congress and the President to get serious about addressing the fiscal health of the country. Bill Hoagland, Senior Vice President of the Bipartisan Policy Center, said in a statement after the CBO report was released. Both parties agree. We have been on an unsustainable path and are in need of correction. This must involve serious discussions, bipartisan negotiations, and legislative action surrounding entitlement reform, revenue generation, and budget process. Where the parties disagree is on what to do about it. The new Republican majority in the House wants cuts to future spending. And a critical mass of House GOPers is threatening to hold up passage of the debt ceiling unless they get what they want. Making budget cuts would not eliminate the debt but may slow its growth in the future. Democrats counter that the current debt has been building for hundreds of years and that a fourth of it was run up during the presidency of Donald Trump, who presided over a massive tax cut and COVID-19 spending. Under President Joe Biden, sweeping domestic spending, including programs for veterans, have added to the nation's bills. Over the long term, our projections suggest changes in fiscal policy must be made. CBO Director Philip Swagel told reporters in a briefing Wednesday. Speaking to union members in Maryland on Wednesday, Biden touted his jobs record and held his ground on increasing the debt ceiling. He said he had been in talks with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, a decent guy, but that he would under no circumstances allow the GOP to take the American economy hostage by refusing to raise the debt ceiling. I will not negotiate whether or not we pay our debt, Biden said in remarks to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers in Lanham. I will not allow this nation to default. Spending and tax cuts are not always dollar for dollar when it comes to the deficit or the debt. For example, a tax cut, on paper, means less money coming into the Treasury. But it could also spur business investment that creates more taxable corporate revenues and more jobs, meaning more people paying income tax. Further, while cutting spending appears at first to reduce the deficit, it could end up costing the government more, since it could stall economic growth. The CBO found in its report that Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which includes hundreds of billions of dollars for climate change and healthcare as well as a 15% minimum tax for large corporations, will reduce the deficit over the next decade. Biden said that if all of the GOP's proposals, including gutting the Internal Revenue Service, eliminating the $35 monthly cap on insulin prices for Medicare patients and continuing the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Set to expire in 2025 were passed, it would add $3 trillion to the debt over the next decade. And he warned that Republicans might try to cut Medicaid, farm aid or help for veterans in exchange for raising the debt ceiling. The president said House Republicans should release a full budget, explaining what they would cut. "I put out my plan in detail. Congress should do the same," Biden said.